Hello and welcome in, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to kick off an exciting series we are calling Career Convos, Breaking Barriers and Building Futures. My name is Hong Min, and I'm part of the Careers and Professional Development team here at WGU. And I'm so thrilled to introduce today's session, Courage to Thrive, led by an amazing guest speaker, Planica. Karolina is a senior manager of analytics at CVS and a proud WGU alumna. She's passionate about empowering others to live boldly, grow deeply, and respect mindfully, a mission that she shares through her biweekly newsletter on LinkedIn, Courage to Thrive. So we are so honored to have you here today to share your insights and experience. So with that, I will hand things over to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for being here today. I know your time is super valuable and I'm truly honored that you chose to spend part of it with me. So let's go ahead and get started. As you can see here, beyond the numbers, we're going to talk about 3 lessons on strength, resilience, and clarity. Next slide, please. So a little bit about me. Hi, I'm Karolina, short for K. Where others see problems, I see patterns, potential, and the power to grow. So a little bit of a background. So for over a decade, I've transformed healthcare data into strategic insights for Fortune 500 executives. But for the most part, the most valuable lessons weren't found in spreadsheets. Shocker, I know. They actually emerged from navigating life's unexpected challenges, embracing setbacks, and finding clarity in the messy journey of personal growth. Today, I'm going to be sharing some key moments with you. When you learn to get comfortable with the discomfort, bounce back from challenges, and see things differently, you just won't improve your career. You will change how you experience your whole life. Today, we'll also explore 3 real stories and the powerful frameworks behind them, each designed to challenge the way you think, lead, and grow. Thanks. You could keep this slide. I was a data entry rep when I first saw it. Excel. My boss was working and I could not look away. For an hour, I literally sat there mesmerized. I was hooked. A few months later, an analyst position opened up. One of the requirements, you guessed it, Excel. I wanted that job. I was terrified. Sweaty hands, stomach in knots. I had prepped for days, studying questions, rehearsing answers, even practicing in the mirror. Then the moment came. I forced a smile and I told myself, act like you belong. The first question I answered, kept talking, kept smiling. They nodded. Halfway through, I even made them laugh. That's a good sign, right? I walked out, relieved, maybe even a little proud. I thought, I nailed it. A week has passed. Crickets. No response. I decided to reach out. Here's the feedback I got. You don't have enough Excel experience. Wait, what? I knew Excel. Okay, maybe not perfectly, but how do I get experience without this opportunity? Fine. I'll prove I'm ready. I went straight to Google and I Googled, how can I prove that I have Excel experience? And the first thing that came up is Microsoft Excel Cert. Next exam, 2 weeks away. I signed up right there on the spot. 2 weeks of hardcore study. I took the exam. Side note, it was way harder than I expected, but that's probably because I studied for 2 weeks. Besides the point, the next day, the results came. I was waiting eagerly, opening up the email, and it showed on there, passed by 1 point. I'm telling you, it doesn't matter. Passing is passing. I did not care. Right away, I decided to send the certificate to the recruiter. Literally, my hands were shaking as I was hitting send. What if they ignored it? My voices were saying. What if all of this didn't matter? Then the response came. I got the job. I didn't wait for the opportunity. I made one. Real transformation happens when you reconnect with your strengths and values and let them guide your next steps. That's where Ground, Grow, Guide framework comes in. Next slide, please. It's a practical, intentional tool to help you discover your strengths, live your values, and take aligned action in your life and leadership. So as you can see here on the slide, we have ground. So that's wherever we're going to be discovering. Yes, we're going to do some fun exercises today. I know you're looking forward to it. Also, we're going to talk about grow. We're going to transform what we learned or rediscovered and turn it into action. And then we have guide, wherever we're going to bring clarity and purpose to all our decisions. Next slide, please. Ground. This is where we're going to get rooted in who you are. So what exactly are strengths and what exactly are values? Strengths, I like to look at them as something that you naturally do well. So your ways of thinking and feeling and responding. Values, on the other hand, are things that matter most to you, and they guide a lot of like your choices, your priorities, and they give you a sense of fulfillment. Next slide, please. So I want you to start thinking about these. And this is just a quick, just to get your wheels spinning. So let's talk a little bit about strengths. What unique strengths do you consistently bring up in challenging situations? For core values, what core values guide your decisions, especially when nobody is watching? And then authenticity. When have you felt most aligned and proud of how you showed up in the world? Next slide, please. Here is a sample list of strengths, and what I would like to challenge you for the next 60 seconds is to write down 3 to 5 strengths. Whether they're listed on here or not, don't even worry about it. You know yourself best. But I want you to read them and notice what feels true. What have others said about you? And how do you show up when things get tough? So I'm going to go ahead and set my little trusted timer here for 60 seconds. And feel free to either type it in the chat if you're brave enough. This is a great community. Or you can write it in your little notes app or do a little voice app. So I'm going to go ahead and set the timer for 60 seconds so you can write down 3 to 5 strings. All right, the time has begun. Hong, I see you're already prepared for the presentation. We have organized, dependable, responsible. Absolutely. And it's okay, you don't have to share yours. Just make sure that you write them down. I see Jane, curious, resilience, patience. Love it. Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. We'll move on to the next slide. So our next component is all about core values. And like we discussed in the other slide, it's more your guiding principles. What matters most to you? And we're going to take another 60 seconds. Like I said, this is not an all-inclusive list. And if you have some carryover from the other one, that is completely fine. Or it could vary drastically. So take the next 60 seconds and reflect on what truly matters to you in work and life. Once again, it's 3 to 5. And I see some other comments. I love to read them here. For Lulu, strong, hardworking, studious, ambitious, love it. From Lisa Kelly, organized, never give up, resourceful, beautiful. All right, so now we're going to be giving you another 60 seconds for your core values. And these are just samples here, as I mentioned. If something else comes to mind, write that down. We're halfway. Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. So I hear learning, gratitude, community. Thank you. That's wonderful. Compassion, gratitude, integrity, authenticity. Beautiful. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Hong. Lisa Kelly, family, growth, integrity. Anthony, achievement, balance, security, family. These are wonderful, wonderful, wonderful core values. Thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing that with our community here. Next slide, please. All right, so now that we have the awareness component, and a lot of you have a lot of phenomenal strengths, as you can see here. Oh, I see Eric coming in through fulfillment, fun, collaboration. Love it. Now what we're going to do is turn it into growth. Some of these you could have known them right on top of the tip of your tongue. Some of this you had to think about, and some of this uncovered itself to you. You have these wonderful strengths, and this is the opportunity for you to bring them out. So what we're going to do next is to turn that self-awareness into intentional action. And we're going to just choose one of each to focus on. So one strength and one core value. And yes, we're doing another 60-second reflection, but this time you have choices. So bear with me here. I'll read through the questions and you can choose one to focus on and answer. How can you use one of the strengths today? Okay, if not today, later this week, that is completely fine, in a meaningful way. Or where can you honor a core value that you've been overlooking? Or what's one action you can take this week that aligns with both? So I'm going to challenge you for another 60 seconds. Pick one question that resonates with you the most. And feel free to share them in the chat as always. We're about halfway through. And don't worry, you don't need to have all these answers within 60 seconds. It's okay. You could think about them later in the day or throughout this presentation. That is no problem at all. Amazing. Thank you. Guys can see that I can carve out intentional time to list out the things I'm grateful for today. Beautiful. All right. Next slide, please. Oh, I see another one come through. Thank you for your active participation. This is wonderful. I can use my strength to excel in my studies, which will help me achieve my long-term goals. Absolutely. Addison, curiosity. I can ask more questions when I recognize I am uncertain about something or if I am making assumptions and need clarity. Love that. Beautiful. These are fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. All right, that leads to the third component, which is guide. And that is leading with clarity, courage, and alignment. And here's another little framework. I know I'm going through threes, but it's just easier to remember and it's easier to talk through as well. So we're going to talk about trust your inner compass. Now you have your strengths, you have your values, and you actually have like a mini action plan for the week, whatever works best for you. So, whenever you're making decisions or how you want to live and show up each day, think about these little components here. So, you want to trust your inner compass. Let's say that you're trying to make a decision, whether big or small. Ask yourself, is this decision aligned with your truth? Or are you getting driven by something of fear or expectation? Second component, how would the most empowered version of yourself show up right now? And authenticity. Are you leading from your core or are you performing for approval? Just some things to think about. Next slide, please. So now we're going to bring together these three components, and it all leads us to taking aligned action. We have the ground, which you did a lot of hard work on that. Great job. Thank you again for your active participation. We talked about strengths and values. Then we talked about the growth. We took that reflection and what we learned and we moved it to action and then guide. Now it could serve as a reminder of how you want to guide your decisions as well as your choices. All right. But let's be real. Taking aligned action sounds fantastic on a slide until you're actually in the moment. Like when your nerves are on fire, when your confidence flies away somewhere, and suddenly your authentic self is nowhere to be found. Let me take you back to a time when I had to make a split-second choice: shrink or show up anyway. Next slide, please. I was so excited. An internal interview for a data role. The countdown began. Any minute now, she would call. My phone rang. I took a deep breath and answered. Hello? A pause. Then, you don't even introduce yourself? I froze. What? I was completely caught off guard. She called me on my work line. Why would I introduce myself? And then the fear sunk in. Is this interview over before it even began? Right at that moment, I had a decision to make. Let this rattle me or keep going. So I asked myself, honestly, what did I have to lose at this point? I pushed forward, answered questions, and stayed engaged. Honestly, I had no idea how it was going. However, I just kept pushing through. Then the interview wrapped up and I was invited for round 2. First impressions matter, but they aren't everything. The interview, it definitely did not go the way that I imagined, but it taught me something important. You can mess up, you can stumble, it can be very, very awkward, and that's okay, but you can still push forward. Next slide, please. that leads me to another framework. I know you're learning a lot and you're super excited, but I just want to take you through this. This is called the 3R method for real-time resilience. And this is what got me through a situation like that. And it could get you through a situation, whether it's at an interview or in your day-to-day. It's called recognize, reframe, and re-engage. Recognize. This is definitely not going the way that I imagined. Awareness is the first key. So you want to name the discomfort. For me, it was a lot of things that went through, as I mentioned, probably fear, shock, who knows? It was definitely not positive. But the fact that I was able to recognize it quickly helped me reframe that. And I told myself also, this moment doesn't define me or my outcome. I paused that spiral and I shifted my mindset from a threat to an opportunity. And then I re engaged. What's the one thing I can control right now? I grounded myself, I focused on the contribution, and I kept showing up. Next slide, please. And here's my final thought on resilience. Resilience isn't about wanting for the storm to pass. It's about choosing to keep showing up while the pressure is still on. First impressions may matter, but your comeback matters way more. Resilience is about digging deep, adapting in the moment, and emerging stronger than before. And your favorite, we're going to do another 60-second reflection point. And I want to challenge you to think about a moment where you made a comeback, big or small. What did that experience teach you about yourself? So I'm going to give you another 60 seconds to think about it. And if you're feeling brave, please feel free to share it in the chat. And if not, that is completely fine as well. Keep that for yourself. But I just want you to think about it because you're definitely stronger than you think. So I'm going to go ahead and get the timer started and drink my coffee. Halfway. Perfect. Keep writing if you're writing, but I just want you to think about it. So Hong, thank you so much for sharing. She mentioned that the unknown is a scary place. 100% agree. But being uncomfortable is how you learn to grow with new skills. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Lisa Kelly, I'm in the process of a comeback now. Absolutely. Great job. Most of what I have done in the past requires a higher level of degree, so I decided to return to school to get a higher degree so I can return to doing what I used to do. Love that. Inspiring. Perfect, Addison said. It reminds me that I can get through difficult times and I can always learn and grow. I think of the quote, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. I think it's instead, it makes you wiser. Wow, great. That's a great distinction. Love that. Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. I love these. These are fantastic. All right. And we have a few more slides. Hopefully I'm still good on time. All right. And if we could move on to the next slide as well. And resilience isn't always a roar. Sometimes it could be a whisper. What if this isn't it anymore? I've heard that whisper. And the moment I listened, it changed everything. Fast forward years. No, I'm not telling you how young I am, but thanks for asking. For a long career stretch, I was immersed in the data world, dashboards, forecasts, and endless spreadsheets. It was my playground, my puzzle, my proof that I could make sense of all the chaos. But then it felt like I was running on autopilot. I wasn't that excited anymore. Projects honestly felt like rinse and repeat. And in those rare moments, when the noise finally faded and I was left all alone with my thoughts, I felt a question I didn't want to ask, but I couldn't ignore it. Is this still for me? What if the spark is gone? What if I'm done with data and I just haven't admitted it yet? So I started looking. Job postings, roles I never would have clicked on before, and then one caught my eye: account management. It sounded different. People facing, strategic, and right there in the job description, it said public speaking required. I literally laughed out loud. Really. But something in me whispered, why not? Challenge accepted. I started practicing. I joined Toastmasters. I was learning the art of a pause, the power of a story, stretching myself in a whole new way. And then came, well, PowerPoint. Let's just say I've always been an Excel girl at heart. But hey, new skills, new role, right? A few months in, I felt once again disconnected. I wasn't analyzing, I wasn't exploring, I was just waiting. Waiting for someone else to send me my numbers so I can copy and paste them into the slides. Nothing against it, it just did not work for me. One day, mid-edit, it hit me. I missed it. It wasn't the charts, it wasn't the tools, it was the thinking. It was the curiosity. It was actually the story behind the numbers. That's what I missed. And at that moment, I saw it clearly. I didn't fall out of love with data. I just stepped away long enough to remember why it mattered. I didn't need to start over. I just needed to give myself permission to pivot and the courage to return. That moment didn't mean I failed. It meant I was listening to myself again. And that experience taught me something important. Growth, it's not a straight line. It's a loop, one that starts with curiosity and leads you back to clarity. Let me show you what I mean. Next slide, please. I know it's a lot of frameworks, so bear with me. Promise it's the last one, but this is how I like to think about things. So we have question, we have experiment, we have evaluate, and we have adjust. So the question component is what else might be possible? It's more listening to that inner voice. Curiosity, which was mentioned in the chat as well, is a catalyst for meaningful change. So question. And then what you do with that question, experiment. Test it with intention. Take small, brave action steps. You don't have to switch careers. Don't worry. That was just my thing. I guess I needed it. But you can take tiny steps. You can do a side hustle in the meantime. You can try to do something in your current role. Just experiment. Then you go to the third bucket, evaluate. Listen to what feels right. Yes, you are collecting data, I know, but this is good data. Notice what energizes you and what drains you. And then the last step is adjust. Honor those discoveries because you will learn a lot about yourself. Either adjust your path or, like me, recommit to it with clarity and purpose. The clarity loop is more a living process than anything else. It's more like a dance between exploring, experimenting, and evolving into who you're meant to be. You question what's possible. You experiment with courage. You evaluate what feels true, and you adjust with intention. But here's the catch. None of this matters if you don't give yourself permission. Because one of the most important things that I learned about growth is you don't need the perfect plan to pivot. You just need to give yourself permission. Next slide, please. And this is what I want to stress on. Permission to pivot. It means it's wisdom, not weakness. You are exploring a different direction and realizing it's not for you is wisdom. That is definitely not weakness. You're learning. It is not a failure, it's growth. Think about it. Changing courses isn't failure, it's evidence you're listening. And it's curiosity without justification because you don't need any. I never told anybody, like, hey, I'm changing to the data world, going into account management, which I never thought I would do, but I did it. But the thing is, it's more about the exploration and the process. And the last encompassing point is full permission. You have full permission to venture out, not from me, from you, and you have equal permission to circle back. Now, yes, to your favorite reflection question. And I'm going to give you 60 seconds. And even if you need more time, don't worry about it. Just start thinking about it. What possibility has been calling to you that remains unexplored because you fear it might not lead anywhere? So I'm going to go ahead and give you 60 seconds again. Let me set my timer here. Perfect. Halfway. And don't worry, still continue thinking, still continue writing. Thanks, Addison. Thank you so much. Jane says, your reflection question actually is the path I am on now. Perfect. I honor you for that. I decided to change careers and pursue something completely different. Good for you. I am learning, stretching, and I'm excited to see what each day brings. Love that. All right, so now that you've given yourself permission, the question becomes what now? It's about honoring who you're becoming. And that brings me to this. I'm going to read Elisa's comment here. I've not considered doing contract work because they are usually the first to go. There you go. Next slide, please. Venturing into new territory is not about abandoning what you know for something better. It's about embarking on a journey that ultimately reveals what you were born to become all along. And that leads me to the last summary slide. So these are the key frameworks that we discussed on the journey. So we have here ground, grow, guide. So we talked about strengths, we talked about values, we talked about turning that into action and then having it as a guide. Then we talked about the 3 R's for resilience: recognize, reframe, and re-engage. And then lastly, yes, I know it's not in a 3 framework, but it's 4. Couldn't narrow it down anymore. It's the clarity loop, where we question, experiment, evaluate, and adjust. As we move forward, I encourage you to ask yourself, what's one insight you're taking with you? And what's one small action you can take on this week to put it into motion? You already have all the tools. Now it's time to use them to shape your path with intention and courage. With that, I'd love to open it up to your thoughts or questions. So let's go ahead and dive into Q&A.
Thank you so much. That was incredible, incredible insight. We'll go ahead and open it up for our Q&A portion, and we do encourage that you ask questions that will spark meaningful conversations. So do focus on questions that will benefit the entire group, and avoid anything too specific to an experience or individual situations. If you like to come off mute, you're more than welcome to raise your hand and we can go ahead and pass the mic over to you, or continue to use that chat feature. I love all the great engagement. And you can plug your question in there and I'll pass it over. Just from all of the great frameworks, you shared a lot of great practical tips today. Something that did come to mind was, what are some characteristics or maybe pitfalls that you've seen others experience, or maybe even yourself, when you're trying to get on a journey of growth and learning? Oh, you're on mute. Oh, there you go.
Yep. So
You're good.
thank you. That's a fantastic question. So I think doubt, I would say, is the first one. And that's why I wanted to include it. Those stories are actually true. They are from my career. And I wanted to showcase that sometimes that little doubt does come up. But we're stronger than that. We want to override it. So I think one of the challenges is don't listen too much to the negativity and try to reframe it. So I would say self doubt, courage. I mean, explaining it, that was an interesting conversation, explaining it to my mom how I went to data for so long and then account management. So it's okay. So you work with those things, but you, like I said, you don't need to justify it, just as long as you feel comfortable and you're like, hey, I'm on this path to self discovery. Listen to your own inner voice, not the inner critic. Great
That's
question.
awesome advice. Thank you. We have a question here from Jane. As you transition between positions within your employer, how did networking and mentorship impact your choices? Great question, Jane.
Thanks, Jane, for that. Oof, networking, one of my second other favorite topics. I have like a whole framework on that. I'm not gonna inundate you with another one. I know. I'm a data person, but I also like my frameworks. But more in a sense, set up a cadence that you feel most comfortable with. I try to, this is just personally me, it could work for you and it could not. But I could only speak for myself, is I try to set up at least two networking events in a month. And that could be either leaders, direct personnel, somebody I interacted with in a meeting, and I only make them for 20 minutes. That way, if the conversation goes well, they usually extended those additional 10 minutes, so you have the 30-minute window. Or if it doesn't go well, at least you saved yourself an additional 10 minutes. But more what I like to do is I like to set up just coffee meets, and I have a whole list of questions that I engage in. So I have 20. Depending on how the conversation is flowing, I would use those to engage with them in the conversation. And then towards the end, I would say, hey, do you want to connect and follow up in a quarter? That way you still leave enough time for your own engagement and you could interact with other individuals, but also that you have enough. And I take like little notes just about them, whether it's like family things. So I use Notion. So I take like little notes and put it in there. So whenever the quarterly meeting comes up, then I at least have some information about them. But networking is very critical, especially if you're moving to different departments. But whenever you are inside, it's great to see who does that person report to, or like the hiring manager, I would look up, if whenever I was seeking my other positions, who did they report to, and try to get time with them and do like a 15 to 20 minute get to know you. And then of course you could sneak in your questions and ask, how do you like the manager that you're working for? And you could go back to like the strengths and the core values. What's important to you? What are you looking for in a leader? For me, I don't thrive in an environment that I have micromanagers. And I know that there's a lot of them and there's nothing against that. It's just not an environment for me. So that would be probably one of my questions, and say, hey, is this somebody that's more flexible? So I would say definitely set up 15 to 20-minute chats throughout your organization, set a timeline, say maybe one a month. That's totally fine too, but just keep that going because you never know when you're going to use them. Great
That's great
question.
advice there. Yes. Any other questions, please feel free to use the chat or raise your hand. And then if you do think of one later on, you can always send us via email and we'll make sure that gets to Carolina here. And then would you be okay if we shared out your LinkedIn? I mentioned earlier that you have your biweekly newsletter. I think that'd be great for folks to subscribe to as well. Um, awesome.
Yep,
And then
you
while
can
we're,
go to the next slide too. That's okay
oh,
too.
yeah,
It has, yep, if you still
perfect.
have access to it. Yep. So for all of you that don't want to click on a link, you could just take a picture with your phone if you would like to connect with me on LinkedIn as well. And if any of this resonates with you, I do also have a newsletter. It's Courage to Thrive, completely free. It's bi-weekly and it gives you tidbits, not all frameworks, I promise. It's just little things or takeaways and some motivation and some things to think about. A lot of reflection on there as well.
Yep, yep. Those newsletters are really great, and they very practical, very doable. And then with that, you have such great practical advice and frameworks. Did you gather these from any books or podcasts? Anything that you can recommend for folks to continue this journey as well?
Oof. I read a lot, so I can't really say which book exactly. So if I were to touch base, so one of the experiments, I know that there's a brand new book called Tiny Experiments. I can't remember the author, but she's the one that says, do exploratory and set timelines like 10 days or 15 days. So I was inspired from that to add the experiment portion. A lot of like the reframe, a lot of it comes from like personal development growth. So I follow a lot of leaders. I don't know if any of you heard of like Brendan Burchard. He's one of like the bigger inspiring. He has Growth Day. So I listen to a lot of that and I read a lot. So a lot of those frameworks. Plus, I'm also like part of his program. So I have access to like positivity and his framework. So it's just more of the combination of everything that I learned. I try to combine and simplify it because there's so much information out there. So hopefully that was helpful for you today.
Yes, no, this was fantastic. And we'll just give another minute here for any questions. Please feel free to send that through. Um, All right, here's one from Lisa. For someone who wants to pivot in their career but is not sure how, what would you recommend?
I would definitely recommend inner work first, just like we started today. That would be the first thing. Is there something that like brings you joy? Is there something that you want to explore? Or if you look back at your strengths or your core values, is there something that you want to challenge yourself with? So for me, I was terrified of public speaking. I still think I am a little bit today, which is totally fine. But that was one of the drivers that made me get pushed and move to a role that's outside of what I'm used to. In the data world, we really don't have to speak that much. So I tried to do something that's challenging. In terms of like reflection, I would say try a couple things, especially if you're in a role right now and you don't want to make that major change. How about reaching out to somebody that maybe already has that role and ask them a few questions? Do like an informational interview and see if that's something that aligns, sparks joy, or if that's something that you're like, you know what, I'm going to step away from this. Um, and do things like that. That's what I would highly recommend. Or if you want to go full in and try it out, I encourage that as well. With caution, you might come back. I mean, that was just from my experience. But yeah, but think about what really brings you joy. I would just go back to that element and see, hey, maybe I should pursue something else, especially if you're like experiencing some kind of burnout or if things are starting to get a little like day to day, like I mentioned, like rinse and repeat, everything just seemed the same. But I would say follow your heart, take a look at your core values again, take a look at your strengths and find something that aligns closer to that.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa, for that great question. And those are great practical advice there too. Any other questions, please feel free to send that through. Or like I mentioned, if you do have a question later on, you can always email us and we'll make sure that gets through. But this has been so helpful. I really like just the reframing of each challenge that you go through, to, think about it as an opportunity or think about it as a way to be uncomfortable and try something new. And I think it was a great reminder too that things can be temporary. If you try something and maybe that's not your cup of tea, you have the ability to pivot or reconsider and reevaluate. So this has been tremendous. Um, All right, so we'll go ahead and conclude today's session. Thank you all for joining and for the thoughtful engagement and being vulnerable and sharing in the chat to keep the conversation. Karolina, your insights on Courage to Thrive were incredibly inspiring, and we're so grateful for your time and wisdom today. We'll be sending out this recording of the session along with that brief questionnaire, and we'd love to hear your feedback. And of course, a big WGU thank you to Karolina for sharing your expertise and experience with the WGU community. Your dedication to living boldly, growing deeply, and reflecting mindfully is truly inspiring. And I know I really enjoyed today's session and learned a lot. So thank you everyone for attending. We hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll make sure to follow up here and share some of these resources. And then you can always continue to stay in touch with Karolina as well. So thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.